Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I listened to a podcast episode about this book the other day, and it just really blew my mind. The whole idea is about,
Yeah.
how to find some peace and get rid of all that stress and anxiety by just living in the moment.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be cool to go through some of the main points of The Power of Now and see if they resonate with you guys too. Have you ever felt like your mind is just racing? Like you're constantly either replaying stuff from the past or worrying about what's going to happen in the future?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's pretty common to feel trapped in that cycle of thoughts, like going round and round.
Yeah, exactly. And Tolle says that there's a more peaceful way to live, and it all starts by understanding the power of right now, the present moment.
Mhm.
His main idea is that you won't find true peace and happiness in the past or, waiting for it in the future. It's here right now.
He argues that, our minds are often so caught up in all these thoughts that we actually miss out on fully experiencing life as it happens.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to enjoy this amazing meal, but at the same time, you're already making your grocery list for next week. You can't really appreciate either one, right?
That's a really good analogy. Yeah, Tolle talks about this thing called the ego. It's this voice in our heads, always looking for validation, control.
Yeah.
And it basically fuels our anxieties.
Right, but he says it's not our true self,
Right.
the ego. It's more like a character we create, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And we let it run the show.
Exactly, give it too much power.
But recognizing that's like the first step. Because once we realize that, we can start to detach from its grip.
So how do we do that? Just tell that inner voice to shut up.
Well, it's not always that easy.
Mm.
Tolle suggests things like focusing on your breath,
Okay.
because it kind of anchors you to the present moment. So every time you notice your mind drifting off to worries or regrets, you just gently bring your attention back to your breath.
That makes sense.
It's a way to train your mind to stay grounded in the now.
It's like a pause button for all the mental noise.
Exactly. He also talks about becoming an observer of your thoughts, almost like a scientist, right? Observing an experiment. So instead of getting caught up in every thought or emotion, you just acknowledge it and let it pass without judging it.
That's a big shift in perspective. Instead of being controlled by our thoughts and emotions, we become the observer, and that gives us the power to choose how we react.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about the ego, but Tolle also talks about this other thing called the pain body. What is that?
Yeah. The pain body is basically all that emotional pain from the past that we carry around. Sometimes without even realizing it. It could be anything, like past hurts, traumas, or even limiting beliefs we've picked up along the way.
So it's like carrying around a backpack full of emotional baggage that we don't even know is there.
Yes, exactly. And the tricky thing is that pain body can unconsciously influence our emotions and reactions in the present. You might find yourself overreacting to something small. And it could be because the pain body got triggered by something from your past.
That is so insightful. It's like just being aware of the pain body. Isn't that a huge step towards healing?
Absolutely. Awareness is key.
Yeah.
Once we see these patterns, we can start to untangle them and free ourselves.
This is all sounding really liberating, but is there a risk of becoming passive if we just accept everything? What about taking action to make our lives better?
It's a good point. And Tolle does address that. Accepting what is in the present moment doesn't mean we become complacent. It doesn't mean we resign ourselves to difficult situations.
So we don't have to give up our goals and ambitions.
No, not at all. It's more about aligning our actions with the present moment. Imagine you're feeling totally overwhelmed by a project at work.
Yeah.
Instead of resisting that feeling or getting caught up in worries about what might happen, you can just acknowledge the feeling. Take a few deep breaths.
Okay.
And then focus your attention on the task in front of you.
That just seems like a much better way to approach it than getting all stressed out.
Right. And the key is to bring that mindful presence to everything we do. Whether it's work, a conversation, or even just enjoying nature.
It sounds like Tolle is saying that real freedom isn't about controlling the world around us, but mastering our inner world.
Yes. He calls it being, with the capital B.
Okay.
It's like this state of unshakable stillness inside of us. And we can access it through present moment awareness.
That's so interesting how he links inner peace with the now. But how do we actually tap into that state of being? Does it take years of meditating or a mystical experience or something?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's actually much simpler than that. Tolle says that being is already our natural state. It's just that all the mental chatter kind of blocks it out. Practices like meditation can help, though, to quiet the mind and make space for that deeper awareness.
So it's not about gaining something new, but more like getting rid of the stuff that's in the way.
Exactly. And get this, Tolle says that reaching this state of being can totally change our relationships too.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, he argues that many of our relationships are actually based on, like, ego needs and fears, you know?
That makes sense. Like we might hold on to relationships because we're lonely or need validation
Yeah.
or even want to control the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that can cause a lot of suffering for everyone involved.
Right.
Tolle contrasts those ego-driven relationships with what he calls true love, which comes from connecting with someone from a place of presence.
So instead of trying to get something from the other person or fill a void, we're just being our true selves, fully present in the moment.
Exactly. When we approach relationships with that kind of presence, we can see the other person more clearly, appreciate who they are, and connect on a much deeper level.
Wow, imagine if we could do that in all our relationships. Like so many conflicts could be avoided.
Totally. Tolle even suggests that when we cultivate presence in our own lives, it actually affects the people around us in a positive way.
Yeah.
Like as we become more grounded in the EO, now we kind of radiate a sense of peace. You know?
Yeah. Like a ripple effect.
Exactly. And speaking of changing our experience, Tolle has some interesting things to say about fear.
Oh, yeah. What about fear?
He says that fear is often like our minds projecting onto an imagined future.
You know, that reminds me of this one time I was freaking out about a presentation I had to give. I spent days worrying about every little thing that could go wrong, but then when the actual day came, it went way better than I expected.
That's a perfect example. Fear often makes things seem way worse than they are, you know?
Yeah.
Tolle says that we can handle almost anything in the present moment, but it's the thoughts about what might happen that really get us stuck.
He has this great quote. You can always cope with the present moment, but you cannot cope with something that is only a mind projection. You cannot cope with the future.
Right. It's like this liberating reminder that if we focus on the now, we take back our power. We don't let fear control us so much.
Right. Okay. So that doesn't mean we should just throw caution to the wind and not plan for the future.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding the difference between, taking responsible action and getting totally lost in anxiety about the future.
I think that's a really important distinction. We can still set goals and work toward them without letting fear take over.
Exactly. And you know what? Tolle actually says that when we're fully present, we make better decisions. Take more aligned actions because we're not all clouded by fear or driven by the ego's need to be in control.
So living in the now can actually help us in every part of our lives. Our relationships, our work, our overall well-being.
Absolutely. Now, some people might think that embracing the now means giving up all their stuff and, going off to live in a cave to meditate.
Yeah, I can see how some people might get that impression, especially with all this talk about detachment and stillness.
Right, but Tolle says that's not what it's about. It's not about abandoning our responsibilities or rejecting the world.
So we don't have to become monks.
No. It's more about being present in everything we do, even the little things like doing the dishes or walking the dog.
Phew, that's good to know. I really enjoy my morning coffee ritual.
And you don't have to give that up. The point is to approach these everyday activities with a sense of presence. Notice the sensations, the sounds, the simple pleasures in each moment.
Savoring life as it happens, even in the ordinary stuff. I'm starting to understand why so many people find Tolle's work so powerful.
Yeah, it's because it gives us a path to freedom, and anyone can follow it. Doesn't matter your background or beliefs. And speaking of freedom, this is where Tolle's ideas get really deep.
Oh, okay. You've got me curious now. What does he say about freedom? What does he say about freedom? It feels like we've kind of already touched on a lot of aspects of it, like detaching from the ego and overcoming fear.
Yeah. He says that true freedom, it isn't really about our external circumstances, but more like our inner state of being. It's about like freeing ourselves from, the tyranny of our own minds.
That reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the ego always wanting to be in control. It's like we're always trying to force the world to fit our expectations, and that just creates a lot of resistance and suffering.
Exactly. Tolle says that real freedom comes from surrendering to what is, accepting the present moment without judgment or resistance, letting go of the need to control everything, and just embracing the flow of life.
It sounds kind of paradoxical, finding freedom through surrender. But I can see how holding on to expectations can cause so much turmoil inside. When we let go, maybe we open ourselves up to new possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
When we surrender, That's when we might discover solutions we never even thought of before. We might find strength and resilience we didn't know we had. And Tolle also points out that true freedom, it's really connected to our relationship with time.
Time. What does time have to do with freedom?
Well, he says that we spend a lot of our lives trapped in the past, replaying all the old hurts and regrets. Or we're projecting ourselves into the future and worrying about what might happen. And all that mental time travel, it stops us from truly experiencing the now. And the now is the only place where real freedom exists.
So it's about shifting our focus from the worries of yesterday and tomorrow to the aliveness of right now. Sounds simple, but maybe hard to actually do.
It is a practice, just like anything else. It takes commitment and, doing it consistently. But the rewards are huge. As we become more present, we naturally start to feel a sense of peace and freedom. And it doesn't depend on anything outside of us.
It's like we're reclaiming something that was always ours, that natural sense of wholeness and connection. It's always there, right here, right now.
I like that, yeah. And as we cultivate that inner freedom, it starts to have an effect on everything, our relationships, our work, our interactions with the world.
So after this deep dive into the power of now, what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners will get?
I'd say the main message is that peace, happiness, and freedom, they're not some far-off goals. They're not things we have to achieve someday. They're available to us right now, in this moment. We just have to shift our awareness and embrace the power of now.
It's powerful to think that we have more control over our experience than we often realize. The key is to quiet the mind and step into the fullness of the present moment. So to our listeners, I'll leave you with this. What could be possible in your life if you were to fully embrace the power of now? What would it feel like to let go of the past and the future and just be here, now?
It's definitely a question worth thinking about. I encourage you to check out The Power of Now for yourself. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, may you find peace, clarity, and freedom in the present moment.